There's a number. Right now, someone you know has just crossed it. They don't feel rich. They feel exactly the same. They wake up, check their phone, experience the same anxieties. But mathematically, statistically, they've entered the top 5% of earners in America. Most people have no idea what that number is. They have wild guesses. They think you need a private jet. They think you need a compound. They think you need employees who have employees. All wrong. The number is smaller than you think, which makes the whole thing worse. Because if you're not there yet, it's not as far away as your brain says it is. And if you're already past it, you understand why you still worry about money. This isn't a get-rich-quick situation. This is accounting. This is how the world actually divides itself when you strip away the fantasy and look at the real numbers. And those numbers have changed in 2026 in ways that matter. Let's establish the problem first. Most wealth conversations in America happen at the edges. There's Instagram billionaires and there's the poverty discussion. There's zero middle ground. No one talks about the gap that actually separates the top 10% from the top 1% because it's uncomfortable, because it reveals something. The comfortable middle-class life that took your parents 30 years to build, you can now achieve that in less than 10 if you hit the right job market and make the right bets. But the jump from there to actually wealthy, that gap is widening fast. In 2019, the threshold for the top 1% was around $750,000 a year. Today, we're looking at closer to $850,000. That's not inflation, that's acceleration. That's the wealthiest people in the room getting richer while the story stays the same. And here's what makes 2026 different. We have actual data. We have tax records. We have salary databases that didn't exist 5 years ago. We don't have to guess anymore. We know exactly where you stand. So let's stop guessing. We're going to build up from the bottom of the wealthy conversation. The top 10% in America today requires a household income of roughly $180,000 annually. That's the federal threshold. That puts you in a room with about 15 million American households. Now here's the thing nobody tells you about the top 10%. You feel normal. You drive a decent car. You live in a decent neighborhood. You're not taking vacations on a yacht. You're still getting slightly stressed about medical bills. The top 10% includes a surgeon and a high school teacher married to another professional. It includes software engineers in mid-sized companies. It includes successful small business owners. It includes dentists who own their practice. These people are not rich in the way culture defines it. They're stable, they're secure, they have options. But they're also doing something most people don't realize. They're making active choices about their money because they finally have enough to make choices about. Someone making $80,000 a year doesn't get to choose between paying for their kid's college or buying a rental property. Someone at $180,000 does. That's the actual line. But here's the problem with the top 10%. You're rich enough to know what real money looks like. You can see the people above you. You're close enough to smell it, but not close enough to breathe it. You're rich enough to want more. And in psychology, that's actually the worst position to be in. The top 10% is not the destination, it's the waiting room. The top 5% inflection point. The threshold is roughly $340,000 a year in household income. That's about 5 million households, half of what we just talked about. And the jump from 10% to 5% is not linear. It's exponential in how different your life becomes. At this level, you're no longer thinking in terms of your job. You're thinking in terms of multiple income streams. You have side businesses. You have investments that matter. You have a financial advisor who isn't just being nice to you, he's actually managing real money. This is where wealth starts to compound, and I mean that literally. You're making enough that the question isn't, can we afford this? It's, does it make sense to allocate capital here instead of there? Most people at the 5% level are doctors, corporate executives, senior engineers at big tech companies, or successful small business owners in year 3 to year 7 of their business. They're people who made one major career decision that worked out. They're also people who realize they're not actually that close to being rich, because the money they're making is already being swallowed by lifestyle creep, taxes, and the simple fact that $340,000 doesn't go as far as it did in 2015. There's something darkly funny about this. You cross into the top 5%, and the first thing you realize is that you're not rich. You're just earning a lot. And those are completely different things. Because earning is temporary. Wealth is what happens when you stop spending what you earn. And the 5% is where that tension becomes obvious. You're making enough to get glimpses of generational wealth, but not enough to actually achieve it without being aggressive about it. The uncomfortable truth: if you're at the 5% level and you don't feel secure, the problem isn't your salary, it's your psychology. You've normalized spending money faster than you make it, which means you're not actually rich. You're running a machine that keeps you employed to yourself. The top 1% breakthrough. This is where you finally see what everybody's talking about. The top 1% threshold in 2026 sits at approximately $850,000 a year. That's 500,000 households in America. And the moment you cross this line, you're not having the same conversation anymore. At $850,000 a year, your taxes are different, your lending options are different, your ability to take financial risks is different. You can actually fail at something and still be okay. But here's what they don't show in the documentaries. 1% status is still fragile if you're living like a 2% person. And most people who hit 1% accidentally start living like 5% people because they can finally afford to. The top 1% includes people who thought they'd never get here. A couple where one person made partner at a law firm and the other did something normal but lucrative. A business owner whose company finally hit escape velocity. Someone who negotiated into an executive role with options that vested well. At this level, your kid's college is not a debate. Your retirement is not a pivot point. You can actually explore possibilities because catastrophe doesn't exist anymore in the same way. But, and this is critical, 1% is not the same as wealthy. And this distinction is why we're having this conversation. Someone making $850,000 a year is in the top 1% by income. But if they're spending $800,000 of it, they have $50,000 a year of actual wealth building. They're high-income poor, and they're statistically overrepresented in the top 1%. The real wealth in America doesn't start at 1% income. It starts when you have net worth that works for you independently of your job. When your portfolio makes more than you do. When you can actually leave. And that's a completely different number. The hidden mechanic: income versus wealth. This is the part everyone misses. We talk about income brackets like they're wealth brackets. They're not. They're completely different categories that everyone confuses. Income is what you earn in a year. Wealth is what you own. Salary is temporary. Assets are permanent. You can be in the top 1% by income and the middle class by wealth. You can be worth $50 million and not make $500,000 this year if you didn't sell anything. The two systems operate on different logic. Here's what happens. You hit the top 10% on salary. You feel stable, so you move to a better neighborhood. Your neighbor is also top 10%, but he owns rental properties. He has equity from an old startup. He has a trust from his parents. His income is $180,000. His net worth is $4 million. You're making the same money. You have a pension and a 401k. Your net worth is $400,000. He's 4 times wealthier than you, and you're in the exact same tax bracket. Now go to the 5%. A software engineer and a radiologist couple making $350,000 a year combined. Both with decent 401ks, both thought they were doing great. Their net worth is maybe $1.2 million at age 40. Then there's the serial entrepreneur who has been making $200,000 a year for 15 years but has built a company that's worth $15 million. Same income, different universe. This is why the income conversation is so broken. Because income is actually not destiny. It's just a variable, a very important one, but just a variable. The actual hidden mechanic is this. The wealth you have compounds. The income you have gets taxed. These are two different forces with opposite trajectories. So the richest people in America are not necessarily the ones making the most money. They're the ones who made money once and stopped working for it. That's a fundamentally different thing, and it requires a different mindset entirely.
Most high-income earners never cross over to actual wealth because they're conditioned to spend. Physicians are famous for this: making great money, retiring broke. The income treadmill is so comfortable that you forget it's still a treadmill.
The uncomfortable math. Let's do some basic arithmetic that most people avoid. If you're making $850,000 a year as a 1%er, your taxes are taking roughly $350,000 of that. You're left with $500,000. That's still incredible. But now you're living somewhere where your mortgage is $20,000 to $30,000 a month. School costs are private. Insurance is different. Food is more. Travel is normalized. Kids' activities cost $500 a month each. Suddenly, you're spending $300,000 of that $500,000. You have $200,000 left. That's generous. Many 1%ers are more stressed about money than 10%ers because the lifestyle has scaled and the anxiety has scaled with it. Now look at it differently. A couple in the top 5% making $340,000 combined. Taxes take maybe $130,000. They have $210,000 left. If they live like a top 10% family, they're spending maybe $120,000 a year. They have $90,000 left to actually build wealth with. That person is wealthier per year than the 1%er, not because they make more, because they've chosen a different relationship with their money. And this is the part nobody teaches you in business school. The wealthiest people in America are not the highest earners. They're the people who realized early that you don't need all of it. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, these people are wealthy beyond measure, but not because they spent everything they earned. They're wealthy because at some point they made a conscious decision that more money wasn't the game anymore. Building something was. Most high earners never get there. They hit six figures and think the game is still money, so they keep earning, keep spending, keep earning, keep spending. Then at 55, they realize they still can't retire comfortably because they've never actually saved anything. The uncomfortable math is this. If you're in the top 1% by income, but the top 50% by wealth, you've made a calculation error. You're not rich, you're just visible.
Zooming out, why this matters in 2026. We started with a specific question. How much do you need to be rich? But the better question is, rich by what metric? In 2026, the goalpost has moved. Not just because of inflation, though that's part of it, because the rules of money have changed. Your parents got rich by having a pension and a house. The house appreciated. They stayed at one company for 40 years. The pension paid them. They retired at 65 and made it to 85. Done. That blueprint is gone. Pensions are extinct. Houses don't appreciate like they used to in many markets. Job security doesn't exist. So the new richness is different. It's optionality. It's having enough that you're not forced into things. That requires more money now than it used to, not because money is worth less, because security is worth more, because the variables in your life are multiplying. So the top 10 percentile threshold of 180,000 is actually lower than it should be when adjusted for the instability people face. Most people at that level are one health crisis away from a different calculation. The top 5% at 340,000 is where you start to sleep okay at night. You can actually absorb chaos. The top 1% at 850,000 is where you're genuinely untouchable. But most of them don't act like it because they're still spending like they're not. The implication is strange. We've all gotten richer by the numbers, but security has gotten more expensive. So the real question isn't how much you need to be rich, it's how much you need to actually feel safe. And those are increasingly different numbers. Here's what's interesting about the top percentile conversation in 2026. The thresholds keep rising, not just because of inflation, but because the wealthy keep pulling away. The top 1% was $750,000 7 years ago. It's $850,000 now. In 7 more years, it'll probably be 1.1 million, maybe more. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that it doesn't matter as much as people think. Because the difference between 180,000 and 340,000 and 850,000 is not actually that much of a lifestyle difference for the people living it. The difference is in what you can survive. And what you can survive is determined by your spending choices, not your earning category. So the real revelation isn't the number. It's that you're probably already closer to being rich than you think, or further away, depending on what you've decided wealth actually means. And that's the decision nobody makes consciously. They just wake up one day and realize they're in a percentile they didn't aim for, living a life they don't remember choosing, with a relationship to money they didn't know they were building. The question isn't what number makes you rich. The question is, what number would actually feel like enough to you? And if you don't have an answer to that, then no number will ever feel right. That's the mechanism the numbers don't show.